So everyone, we're here with our next Alumni Rebound Podcast with Caroline Ryan, and we're going to ask Caroline to start off by giving us a little background, where you're from, what year you are, what you graduated with, whatever you want us to know about your JMU time. So I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks. My name is Caroline Ryan, and I graduated in May of 2020 from JMU. Well, at JMU, I was a double major with communication studies and dance, and I was also in honors college, worked at the Writing Center. And since graduating, I've moved to Charlottesville, and I work for Albemarle County Public Schools in their Department of Technology and for a recreation club called Berkwood.
So just because I'm interested, what is Berkwood?
They're a recreation club. They're based in Mechanicsville, Virginia, which is where I'm from. And I run their communications. So they are like a gym, pool, tennis court combo in Mechanicsville, Virginia. Yeah.
So then you said dance. So is dance still playing a role here somewhere, or?
Not as much as I'd like it to be. I actually am getting my second vaccine dose in 2 days. So I'm really looking forward to going back to some mass dance classes after I'm fully vaccinated. But since the pandemic started, so since about March, I haven't been in the studio at all, which is a little disappointing.
Sure.
But I've been staying in touch with the dance world in different ways. I have a lot of friends from JMU who are doing lots of really awesome projects I've been able to see over Zoom and, do Zoom seminars and stuff like that. So
Okay.
I've been keeping up in different ways.
Sure. Okay. Well, first, congratulations on getting the second vaccine. Excited for you.
Thank you. I am too.
And the CDC put out some interesting guidance today. I don't know if you saw it.
I did. Yes. Vaccinated people can be indoors without masks. I don't know how soon I'll be doing that, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. Indoor with other people, fine. I feel like I've got a good collection of masks now too. I think I'm going to wear them for a while.
Exactly. They're great accessories.
Yeah, exactly. Although I've not seen as many designer masks as I expected. I sort of expect people to really bling them out, and that has not happened. So, all right. So let's talk about, you graduated in a pandemic. We have a class that's about to do that again. So let's talk about the end of your time. So, you went on I assume you went to spring break, or you were on spring break when you found out that things were different. Can you talk about sort of the end of the time at JMU and sort of wrap the job search stuff into that, unless you already had the job even before that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it was about a year ago today, actually, spring break, when we found out we weren't going back to JMU. And so I went back home to Mechanicsville and I lived with my family. Actually, my whole family was back in our house for the first time in forever. And I graduated in my living room watching on my TV. And my family was really awesome. I graduated with just my family around me, but they threw me a nice little pandemic party. We had a nice dinner and all that.
Nice.
But I did not have a job straight out of graduation. I started applying for jobs maybe November of my senior year, which honestly, in my field is too early. All those jobs were filled way before I actually graduated. So I started applying in earnest probably about March of my senior year. And I was really interested in working in arts administration or something like that, maybe for an arts nonprofit. Come March, the pandemic hits, arts jobs are dead. So I was like, that's fine. I'm also really interested in working in maybe higher ed administration or education administration, something like that. I was like, this is brilliant. State jobs are notoriously steady, great benefits. I'll apply to those. In March, early April, there was a state hiring freeze. So I had a slight emotional breakdown then, realizing that it was going to be a lot harder to find a job than I was hoping it would be. So right after graduation, early May of 2020, I saw a position for an unpaid internship with Berkwood Swim Rocket Club, doing their communications. And I thought, I need something for my resume. I will agree to do this for a couple months if they'll take me, which they did. And they ended up needing a lot more communications than they anticipated because of the pandemic. And so that eventually turned into a paid part-time position, which I continued. But I was also moving to Charlottesville in August because my boyfriend is going to grad school at UVA. And so I just kept applying and applying for jobs in Charlottesville. And basically I had to make peace with the fact that I was going to be moving here before actually finding a full-time job. And the day I moved into my apartment here, I interviewed for my current job with Albemarle. So it ended up working out just fine.
And I don't know who will listen to this, but tell us about the job. Is it like what you want to do forever? Is it just a good first job? Again, I don't need you to bash anybody, just sort of wondering, how does this fit?
Yeah, sure. So I work in the Department of Technology for Albemarle County Public Schools. I don't know anything about technology. I studied communications and dance, and they hired me, thank God, for some reason. But it's a great job. I really enjoy it. I'm an office associate. That's my job title, but I basically do office management stuff. So thankfully, not too technology integrated. But I do a lot of like payroll, bookkeeping, purchasing, reconciliation, stuff like that. I work with the coordinator of digital equity and a lot of digital equity projects across the county, which is really exciting. And we have a team of educators in our department as well, and I help them with different projects they might need, whether that's researching certain things, stuff like that. So I didn't anticipate to be in this job, and I don't know if that's something I would be doing for the rest of my life, but I do really care about education. And so at the end of the day, it is nice to think, oh, the things I'm doing are actually affecting children in this county today and tomorrow. So I've always been interested in maybe some kind of education career, not teaching per se, but maybe administration or policy. So I'm happy to be here.
Sure. Well, and I think too, and Caroline, it'd be helpful if you can talk about this a little bit, is so many students graduate thinking, I'm going to get my perfect job. It's the start of my field. I'm going to work in this, whatever. And that's just not true for a lot of people. And it sounds like you're plenty happy. I'm not saying you're unhappy with it, but I think that understanding that getting your first job sometimes is just a first job, not necessarily the dream job. So can you talk about sort of how that still feels good, even though you're like, I don't know that I'm going to do this forever, but you also feel like you're doing things that matter?
Right. And by last summer of my senior year, that was not even on my mind anymore when I was applying for jobs. I was certainly applying for jobs that looked really exciting to me, but I was also like, I was applying to be like a dental receptionist and stuff. I was like, please, someone. But I will say, while this job does not particularly relate to what I went to school for, they have been really awesome about letting me get into projects that do relate to what I studied. So they know I have a background in communications, and they've been really awesome about involving me on communication projects. We actually just launched our own social media. Follow us if you want to follow ACPS Department of Tech. So they've been really great on letting me jump into projects that I do actually have some expertise on. So there's a lot of room for growth there, which I really appreciate. But sometimes you just have to find ways to engage yourself in those interests or those fields of study on your own. It's been kind of nice keeping my Berkwood job on because I do have a little bit of communications roles on the side from my full-time job to kind of keep up those skills. So no, your first job might not be, right on the mark of what you studied, but that doesn't mean you can't keep those things up.
Right. And I'm looking this up. ACS, what is it?
Oh, it's Department of Tech on Twitter. It's at DEPT of Tech on Twitter. You'd be like our 10th follower or something. Or under Albemarle County Public Schools. Yeah, nice. Give us a follow.
Follow. I'm number 25.
Yes, thank you.
The big day.
I only came here to promote our social media, actually. So thanks for having me on.
Well, we'll see. Maybe you'll get a bunch of hits. I'm on it. I'm in. I'm 24 or 25. I couldn't tell.
Great.
So, but I also think that's really important. One of the things that that I think is important that people do when they get in their job is that they ask for stuff. That they, I used to, and I still do sometimes give advice that you won't get what you don't ask for. And I think about, if you had not pointed out your communications interest and background, you might not have gotten involved in any of that. So, can you talk about sort of how to advocate for yourself, how to ask for what you want and what you need in the workplace?
Sure. And I will say I'm not an expert on that, totally improving upon that myself. But not only in this job, but also my job with Berkwood. Like I said, I started out as an unpaid intern, and I figured that would be like a couple hours a week. And in the height of the pandemic over the summer, they just started needing me more and more. And it got to the point where I kind of went to them and said, reasonably, I can't be giving you as much as you're asking for and doing so unpaid. And so I talked to them about either limiting my hours or making me making my position paid. And they made my position paid, which I wasn't really expecting. And I really, really appreciated it. So sometimes you just have to remind yourself, and you can forget this easily when you're graduating and applying to so many jobs, that you do have to remember to know your worth, that, you went to college, you got a 4-year degree, you worked really hard to get it. So you are deserving of these things. You just sometimes have to remind yourself. And like I said, I'm still trying to do that myself. But I think if you do put yourself out there and remind people of the skills you do have that you'd like to contribute, they'll really happily accept your help. And I will say my coworkers and supervisors are also really awesome of just providing those opportunities to me as well. I think sometimes they have more faith in me than I do in myself. So, which might be their education background. They've been teachers before this. So they kind of see that in people.
Sure. Well, and I think I find that especially true with people coming out of college, that the people around them often have more faith in them than they have in themselves. But also, Caroline, one of the big keys of what you just said that might become the theme of this, I'm now giving a theme to each podcast, is this concept that you could have just been unhappy with Berkwood and just said, you want too much from me, I'm out of here. But instead you brought it up and you didn't demand it. You didn't say, this or that. It wasn't an ultimatum. Sounds like you just said, I can't keep doing this much for you for free. Is there another option?
Mm-hmm.
And there was. And there are so many stories of people who got frustrated with a job, with a boss, whatever, and just left. And then they find out later, if they just said to their boss, I'm doing too much, I can't do this, their boss would have said, well, I didn't know, or else I would have cut back your hours or promoted you or whatever. So I think that concept of advocating for yourself is a really important, and just asking. I mean, advocating feels like fighting, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
you just said, I can't keep doing this much for free.
Exactly. And you don't know until you ask.
Right. And what happened? You didn't do that much more for free anymore.
Yeah. Turned out way better than I thought it would.
Exactly. I love it. So let's go logistics a little bit. Talk about money. What was it like to think about bills, rent, taxes, all that? So how did you manage that? Or maybe you'd always been managing it, but sort of what was that like for you?
Yeah, I am a big proponent of budget spreadsheets. I track every cent I spend, and I've been doing that probably since sophomore year of college when I stopped having a meal plan and things like that. But in college, my parents paid for my rent. And then when I went home, when the pandemic started, I didn't have an income, but I also didn't have a lot of expenses because I was living home with my parents. Thanks, mom and dad. But I also, like I mentioned, knew I'd be moving to Charlottesville, knew I needed to find full-time work there, and it was getting pretty down to the wire at that point. So I definitely had to be very smart about budgeting and saving for that move, knowing that I'd be living off of my savings a little bit until I was able to find a job there. So having even a part-time job with Berkwood was really helpful with that. But since moving here and now having a full-time job's income, it's been obviously a little better. But honestly, the pandemic has definitely changed my expenses a little bit. I'm not really traveling. I'm not going out to eat with friends. I thought I'd be spending a healthy chunk of change on a gym membership or dance classes, but that hasn't really applied here. So I do track everything I spend pretty thoroughly and try to budget a lot for savings and long-term savings. But it's definitely been a little different in the pandemic.
Sure. Well, it'd be interesting too. I think everyone's lifestyle my wife, Jamie, always says that she feels like her like public and sort of personal skills are atrophying, in the middle of all this. And I also think our like, how do you spend money responsibly skills are probably also beginning to atrophy too. Of like, now you're gonna be like, I can go out. Oh my God, what are we gonna do?
Exactly.
So I wonder how we're all gonna do when we're allowed to like leave our homes and.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I'm also online shopping a lot more than I probably would be otherwise. So there's that too.
Yeah, there is I've been told too many Amazon boxes coming to the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to work on that. So okay, let's go on the flip side. It sounds like you manage money well. What's either a mistake or a regret or something that you don't think went the way you wished it had, so sort of since graduation?
Yeah, I mean, moving to another city with the uncertainty of not finding a job yet, I'm not going to say it was a mistake because I know I was working really hard on applying to jobs, but it is really stressful. And luckily, I was moving there with my boyfriend who is on a fellowship for graduate school. And so it's a little stressful, moving in with a significant other or partner and having to talk about finances. And so we were splitting rent a little bit differently because he was making money and I was not at the moment. So that was really helpful. But I would say moving to a new city without finding a job yet, very stressful. I'm not going to say it's a regret or a mistake, but it's sometimes what you got to do. It's sometimes you have to take that jump, but
Right.
it can be a really a strenuous decision.
So let's use that for a second, Caroline. And what do you wish you had thought about, done different in that whole process of, oh wait, I'm moving to this other place. I've never been there before. I don't have a job yet. Like, talk through a little bit about, maybe looking back, anything you would have done differently. Because again, think about, and we're going to start shifting into advice for the people that are about to graduate, but you did it, it went generally pretty well, but what do you sort of wish you had thought of before you did it?
You can never save enough. I've always, worked over the summers and stuff like that to save money for the school year. I also worked at the writing center, so I had a slight income at school. But you really have to focus on saving. It's a little bit different in college. You're not making a lot of money, so you can only save but so much. But saving is so important. I've really learned that because, you might need to end up moving to another city or something and not find a job right away. And so since getting a full-time job, I've tried to focus a lot on having, an emergency fund or having enough to live off of for 6 to 12 months, and then also planning for long-term saving. So I think that's a huge part of it. And you can start saving whenever, obviously. So throughout college, through your summer job, just always pack something away because you don't really know what you'll be doing after graduation unless you're really lucky and you found a job in February or something.
Right. But Caroline, it sounds like you've got this, and you're going to hate when I say this way, but it sounds like you've got this figured out. So
That's funny.
like, there's no way. Don't say that. But can you talk a little bit about, when you get, and you don't need to give actual dollar figures of what you make, but what are you putting away each check, versus like savings versus, investments and things like, do you mind talking through that a little bit? Because I think almost everybody believes they can't save it all.
Right.
And my dad was an accountant, so he beat this into me as a kid, figuratively, not literally, but about the have to save money. So can you just talk about sort of those decisions you've made and what, like maybe a percentage or some amount generally you're putting away each paycheck, each month, however?
Sure. So I will say, everyone can save. I would say that or something. When it comes down to it, making more money will always help you with saving. I think I realized that as I got a living wage, making more money will always help you be more financially stable and budget better and save more. So I just want to put that out there. So if you're making, what the state's minimum wage is right now, don't be beating yourself up because it's way too low.
Sure.
But I budget monthly because I get paid monthly, and I have a budget for what I spend on rent and utilities and groceries and anything else I need to spend money on, subscriptions, things like that. But I reassess it every month, see if I need to cut anything that I don't really need to spend money on. Like I budgeted a lot for gas moving here, and I use way less gas than I did in Harrisonburg, so I could cut that budget to put it something else. So I try to put into savings at least like 30 to 40%. I wish I could give you like actual numbers. Like I said, my expenses haven't been too bad in the pandemic, thankfully. I have very cheap rent, thank goodness. But and then I try to put a fair chunk, like $200 into long-term savings. I recently started a Roth IRA, and what I mean by that is I went to my parents and said, please help me start a Roth IRA. And so I try to put like $200 a month into there just so it's in long-term. And then I have 4% of my paycheck going to retirement savings with my employer.
And then Caroline, to be honest, everything you just said is almost totally different than anything I've heard from any.
Oh, no.
So I want, like, tell me the why. Why are you doing this? Why do you think this is important? Like, what drives you in making that choice?
I think I'm just a practical person, and money sometimes stresses me out. So I just want to be prepared for things. And whenever there's like a retirement seminar or something at my work, I always go to it because I just want to be ready, even though like I said, I'm probably not going to be at this job by the time I retire. So, or with the county by the time I retire. But I just want to know how to be prepared for those things in the future. And this sounds silly, but I've watched a lot of TikToks on budgeting and things like that. And they all say, because investments and things like that, they compound. So the earlier you start, the better off you'll be. And I'm not like a super financial brain person. I'm not super into money, but I don't know these things very well. But I just know the earlier you start, the better off you'll be. So I just wanted to make sure I was getting started now. I've graduated college. It feels like a nice turning point in my life to actually focus on those things. So I've just made it a priority, I guess.
Okay. Well, you just named the tagline for your podcast. The earlier you start, the better off you'll be.
Oh, okay.
Love it. So then you mentioned subscriptions. So I don't want everybody to think that you're not doing anything fun. What's your splurge, or what's the thing you give yourself, either a subscription or like a thing every month you're allow or every week or whatever?
Sure. Well, I do. I actually stopped it recently on my last budget review, but I have been doing a makeup subscription uh, products thing. It's called Ipsy. So once a month, they'll send you a bag with like 5 different travel size samples of makeup. And I don't actually know how to do my makeup. So it was kind of fun to just get new things to try out. And every month they send you a cute little bag. So that was definitely a completely discretionary purchase. That's just for fun. Just a little serotonin boost to get a package in the mail.
Right. But now you cut it.
I cut it. I wasn't enjoying it that much anymore. So I said, it can go. I still spend plenty more. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, you can always find a different thing that you'll like more.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So then let's talk about friends. I know you moved to Charlottesville with a boyfriend. So obviously you have one good friend right there with you in the same place. But how about other friends? How have you stayed in touch? Have you stayed in touch? How has that gone? What's that been like?
I wish I was better about keeping up with people. I don't find myself to be very good about it, especially after college. You have to be so intentful about it. I was really lucky because I was a dance major, so I worked with and saw my friends like 14 hours a day every single day. And now I have to be really intentful on contacting them or like making a little Zoom date or something like that. So my best friend and my former roommate, we usually Zoom about once a week just to catch up with each other. Sometimes we'll stream something at the same time to watch TV together. And like I said, I've had lots of dance friends who've done really awesome work that I can view on Zoom. So I've seen a lot of their stuff. I was really relying, honestly, after graduating on being so close to Harrisonburg so I could go back and see shows, which unfortunately I can't, but I can still see them over Zoom now.
Sure.
So I've relied on those connections a lot, but honestly, I wish I was a little better about just getting back in touch with people and keeping up with people.
Sure. Okay. All right. So then these are our last two areas. So first, what are the biggest differences between college life and life after college? 2, 3, 4, whatever things. So in your mind, what are the biggest differences, changes between those two lives?
I would say the first thing is that I don't want to say my days aren't as interesting, but my days are not as spent on such a variety of topics anymore. I don't think you appreciate in college because you've been in school all your life up until that point that, you go to a history class and then you go to a business class, then you go to a dance class. Your days are so varied and you get to learn about so many different topics at once that everything's, there's never a dull day. Whereas these days I go to work and then I go home, maybe work at my second job, watch some TV. I don't engage in such a variety of topics anymore. And then two, I would also say you're not surrounded by people who are the same age anymore. And I guess I just got really used to being around people when they're, 18 to 22 years old. And now I'm at work and my my work besties are 37 and 65-year-old men and they rock. But it's a little isolating being like the only person in their 20s sometimes. So that's definitely a big difference that I didn't really anticipate.
Yeah, I do think it's funny. I remember I had a birthday years ago, and I mean, obviously I had one every year, but you know what I mean. And we wanted to invite people over, and I was like, I want to invite these two people, and Jamie's like, but they're going to be 30 years older than everyone else there. I'm like, I know, but they're awesome, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, as long as they don't feel out of place. I'm like, well, we'll ask them on the front end and see, if they're okay. And they came and they were totally great. But it was like two of my best friends in my work environment were people who joked about being old enough to be my parents.
Right.
We both went to high school the same time in the same town. We could have actually been your parents, based on, because they both had kids my age. So I do think it's interesting. The multi-generational stuff is so interesting, but also is so enriching in your life too.
Yeah. I mean, they can offer me great advice because we're in very different places in our lives,
Sure.
but they've been where I've been. So,
Right. So, all right. So that takes us to the last question, which is about advice. You have been places they have not been. And by that, I mean our class that's about to graduate. So I want you to think back to a year ago now and think about what you've lived through, what you've done, what you've accomplished. What advice would you give to yourself? This would have been spring break week here at JMU, but we don't have spring break, sadly. And they're in the middle of this, they're about to finish in a couple months. in about 8 weeks from now. So what would you tell yourself? What would you tell them about life after JMU, life after college? What advice would you give them?
So first, I think I would tell them that they should actually celebrate on the graduation day. I don't know what graduation is going to look like for them. I don't imagine it's going to be big crowds of people on the quad or anything like that. But I definitely celebrated on that day with my family, but it's not like the gigantic life moment that we had all envisioned for ourselves, the class of 2020. And I would say the class of 2021, actually make sure you celebrate yourself on that day because, and I think I've realized this graduation and then going forward, that you forget to realize that where you are right now is where you were actually dreaming of being 4 years ago or a year ago. And if you don't realize that, you're just caught up in the anxiety of, the unknown and finding a job and all that, you're never going to appreciate it. So actually celebrate yourself and take that moment to realize that you accomplished your goals and then worry about all the other stuff. And then two, I would say, just know your worth. Kind of like I was saying earlier, you did accomplish all those things, and it's easy to kind of feel like a failure when you're applying to so many jobs and giving into that fear of unknown. But just remind yourself, you did it. You accomplished this one huge goal. You can accomplish the next one.
Yeah. Awesome. So Caroline, anything else on your mind or anything else you were hoping would come up or anything else you're like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to tell people this? Anything else you can think of or you want to share?
I think just for the class of 2021 who are maybe listening to this, I'm just really proud of you for getting through this entire year in a pandemic. I now work in schools and watch how all these kids have to virtually learn, and it just seems so hard. And I'm really happy for them. And just stay in contact with your JMU connections, whether that's your friends, your professors, so you can do things like this one day. Maybe that's awesome.
No, I love it. Well, Caroline, thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for being in the school systems and with Kirkwood. And I'm glad things have worked out, and we look forward to seeing where you go from here.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.